Your Free to Go is sponsored by Milburn Men's Clothing, where top athletes shop for sharp, tailored style. And whether Mark and I are in the studio or the courtroom, Milburn dresses us for success. Mention YFTG and get 10% off at Milburn Men's Clothing, which has been providing the finest in men's clothing and suits since 1946. Call 651-645-2922 or visit www.milburn.com. Welcome back, everybody, to Your Free to Go. Hopefully it's your favorite podcast. I know Mark and I are loving doing this and providing you with the stories of our career, the cases that we've handled. You know, the beauty of podcasting is that we put this out there and every Friday we drop a new episode and it could be out there forever. And someone could just drop in when they hear about our show and listen to episode number 10 or 40 or number 3, or they may go in order 1, 2, 3. So we're not sure when you're going to be listening to this episode, but at this point we've been out there a few months already. And what's really cool is that we're growing by the thousands. Every week we get more and more people coming to our YouTube site and our social media sites and actually subscribing and listening to our podcast. So what I want to start the show with, Mark, is to just say to everyone that's listening and enjoying it, please feel free to direct messenger us on Instagram or TikTok. You can reach out to us through emails and so forth, and let us know if you know what you like about the show, what you don't like. If you have questions for us, you know, you're a big part of this, and we want to make sure that what we're talking about and what the stories we're sharing, the information we're sharing is something that you want to hear, and maybe there's more you want to hear or less. So please don't hesitate. Now that we've grown to a pretty substantial audience, we want to hear from you. So hope you guys will reach out to us. Like I said, most easiest way is Instagram and TikTok, and we're here for you. And, we're going to stay here and we're not going anywhere. So, right. So we have a couple cases today, kind of back to our crazy ass cases. I want to share first, because I have a really cute, relatively short case. I know you have a more serious case. It's kind of longer. So if you don't mind, Mark, I'll start with this kind of a cute case. Could have been very serious, but fortunately it worked out. So you're good with that?
Absolutely. I'm anxious to hear it.
Okay, cool. All right. So this is a case of the Connecticut house party. All right. Up in Connecticut, cops show up to a house party because some neighbors called and said it was really noisy and there were a lot of cars on driveways and on the grass and everywhere. People in the driveway, people all over the house. And it was a nuisance. Cops show up. They walk into the house. They see drugs. They see underage sex. It's basically a kids' party. They see a lot of sexual acts going on with kids that were clearly underage. They see underage drinking. They see kids out after curfew. In this part of Connecticut, there's a curfew. There's a noise ordinance violation. There's some criminal mischief, which is like there was some broken glass of a window. They saw some spray paint on the side of the wall of the house.
Sounds like my high school.
Yeah, right. The parties you used to host when you were in high school. Everyone wanted to be at your house because you threw the best parties. So what was interesting, though, is there were approximately 60 kids there, and they were all from a very, very elite boarding school. When I say elite, I mean not only were these kids smart and driven to be successful, college careers and business careers, but they came from very influential and wealthy families, right? The officers picked up on this very, very quickly. So they were in a little bit of a predicament, the cops. They don't want to ruin these kids' future, but at the same time, they see a lot of things going on that were illegal. And they had neighbors complaining, so they had to do something. So basically what they did, though, they spent a good 15 to 20 minutes in the house telling the kids, calm down, lower the music, stop with all the nonsense, the drugs, stop doing all the stuff, behave yourselves, we're going to cut you a break, but just get in line, we don't want to have to come back, basically. And the kids said, yes, sir. They were polite. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We hear you.
Probably scared, huh?
Yeah, I think they were scared. At the same time, they were, again, from kind of families that were a little bit entitled.
So they were,
a little bit cocky.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well,
so,
as it turns out, very.
Yes. Yes. We'll come full circle to that in a second. So the cops cut them a huge break and they leave. And two cops in particular, there were several cops there, but two cops in particular get in their cars, they drive, they go through, their patrol officers, so they're going around the community. It's late at night. They're driving for about 2 hours. Neither of them get a call to go to a burglary or a speeding ticket or anything like that. They're just patrolling. They finally say on the radio to each other, hey, let's meet up. There's a 24-hour donut shop. And I'm not lying. They literally do meet up at the donut shop.
A little bit of a cliche.
Yeah, right. I don't know where that came from historically, but cops love their donut shops. So they decide, the two officers, we'll meet up at the donut shop. And it's over 2 hours since they left this house
party. And they've been driving around the community.
Correct.
Okay.
They haven't had to make any stops, though, because everyone's been behaving for this house party. They both pull into at the same time, and as they get out of their car, they point to each other. One officer points to the other officer's car, and the other points to him, and they just start being like, oh, they throw their hands up in there, and they're like, oh, my God. It turns out that some kids at the house party painted big penises on the police car. Literally, both cars had penises painted on them, and
they've been driving around the neighborhood
unknowingly,
right? And their cars,
right? Now, when I talked to the officers, they were like, there were cars kind of honking at us and this and that, and we just thought, they were just being respectful or something. But in hindsight, they think they were trying to tell them, hey, you got a penis on your car. So these cops. They are literally, I think Ben, our engineer, is getting a kick out of this one. Maybe Ben was one of the kids. I'm not saying.
How long ago was
that? He's not from Connecticut, I don't think. So, yeah. So the cops are like, legitimately, they're furious. Like, we cut these kids such a break, and this is what they do to us.
They have to be pissed.
Yeah, so they throw on, they don't get their donuts, unfortunately. So now they're in a really bad mood. They throw on their sirens, their emergency lights, and they rush back to the house. And believe it or not, the party's still going on, but all the kids are well behaved. They don't see any drugs. They don't see any inappropriate sex, and they don't see any alcohol. They're like, wow, at least they did listen to us. And they find the paint cans. They're like right on the grass where their cars had been parked, and it's the color on the paint can that's on the color of the penises on their car.
Pretty good circumstantial evidence.
Yes, really good. But they are so determined now. We're going to get whoever did this to us. Well, what they did was when they took the paint cans, they tried to get fingerprints, but because remember I told you they had actually painted some of on the wall of a house. Apparently, like a lot of the kids grabbed the paint at one point or another, so there were tons of fingerprints on the cans. So they really had no way of identifying. We actually had, believe it or not, because they were wealthy kids, I hired an expert artist who was able to say that one person painted on each paint. In other words,
were they good paintings?
They were very good
that
paintings.
Was the Picasso of penis.
We were gonna the penis Picasso. We were gonna frame them. They were so nice, but they could tell that So they couldn't figure it out.
You could hung them. They were hung, right?
They were well hung penises. There were Picassos. So at the end of the day, they couldn't prosecute them because they couldn't figure out. So they're like, well, maybe we'll get the kids. Someone will confess. Someone will rat someone out. Boy, these kids, they stuck together. They were like brothers in war together.
Omerta, it was like the mob.
Yeah, I think they were. They were like, we are going down together or not at all. And so because of that, the cops had a really hard time making a case, but they really wanted to make a case because they were so furious. So what they do, they said, well, we can't get them criminally, but we can make a nightmare for them at their school.
Right.
So they contacted the school. And they basically said to the school, this is wrong. So I want to segue for a second, because I've done a lot of discipline hearings at schools, and of all levels, by the way, elementary, middle, high school, college. So I've had lots of hearings over the years for the school discipline violations. Well, many of you may remember from 1999, there was a mass school. It was one of the first, at least publicized. Columbine, exactly. Yeah. That was right. I'm sure there had been shootings before that, but that was the one that got the first real mass media attention.
Yes.
Colorado, Columbine, Colorado, mass school shooting.
It's always mentioned in the debate on the Second Amendment.
Yeah, you're right. And since then, there have sadly, tragically, been a lot of school shootings. Well, before Columbine, If something happened at a school, the schools wouldn't suspend a child. They wouldn't expel a child. They'd maybe put them on a, like a in-school suspension. The private schools, whether it was college or a private, high school, they didn't want to lose the tuition from the student, and they would do everything to keep the kid in school, and they'd slap them on the wrist or whatever. But post-Columbine, there was a major, major, major shift in how the cases of students are being handled. So I just want to take a moment of liberty to share this, because it's really important for our listeners who have people and children or they themselves are in school to know this. There's, no matter what level, elementary, middle, high school, college, there's zero tolerance now. The culture or the position, the philosophy of all these schools is that we are going to protect the right of the entire student body, even if it means infringing on the rights of one individual. So if you do something that they think is wrong, you're gone. You're being expelled, you're being thrown out, and even without giving due process, without giving hearings. I'll give you an example. If you get called up by your school for a discipline hearing, nowadays, you can't even bring a lawyer with you. You can't bring your parents with you. They can actually be present, but they can't speak. They can't say a word. So I've actually told parents or students, don't hire me anymore, because the moment the school walks into that hearing, their decision's already made, and I'm not allowed to talk anyway, nor are the parents.
So you can't have Al Pacino in Scent of the Woman there?
No, I wish. Yeah. I love when you bring up these movie quotes. I said early on in this podcast, first couple episodes, that we got to do an episode on great movies.
Oh my God.
All right.
We're going to do 10 episodes.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Right, I know Ben would like that.
I would like that a lot. I think that would be really good.
I think our showrunner Callie would like it too.
We'll probably start with my cousin Vinny and then just go on.
Well, yeah. Now I'm thinking all the cases or things or movies that you could be debunk or that wouldn't happen.
It's interesting because I always said, just to digress for a second, I always said the way I'm going to end my career when I know it's my last case and nothing's really on the line. And I don't care if I get yelled at or disciplined or whatever. I'm gone after that. I'm going to stand up an opening statement and just like Vinnie Calo or whatever his name, Gambini, say an opening statement with respect to what the prosecutor just said. Everything he just said is bullshit. And
sit down. Right.
That's my dream.
We're going to make that come true for you. Right. So getting back to the school, so now there's zero tolerance, and I tell parents and students, don't hire me anymore. The decision's already made up the moment you walk in that room. Even if you hire me and I go with you, I'm not allowed to speak. It's really across the board.
Liability offense.
Yeah, and across the board, every school has adopted this policy within their handbook, their student handbook. So
what happened in your case though that you've been talking
right.
about?
So again, this was pre-Columbine.
Pre-Columbine,
right?
Okay.
It was probably around 95. I should have looked it up before I came in. Columbine happened in 1999, but it was a few years before that. The school didn't want to expel these kids and lose their tuition, and they wanted to coddle these kids and so forth. So we came up with a really interesting, and they weren't criminally charged, but the police wanted to. They were really going after this investigation pretty hard. They wanted to find a way to prosecute. So I opened a dialogue with the police department. And with the parents were on one side. I was talking to the kids together with the parents, and then the police on the other side. And we came up with a two-pronged solution that satisfied everyone. Number one, every student that was at that party, because remember, no one flipped, no one narked on anybody. So all approximately 40 to 60 kids, whatever that number was, I forget, they all wrote an essay. It was 250-word minimum about the importance of following instructions of an officer, the reason you should respect officers, the importance of having rules, and so forth. And they all did that. And number two, one Saturday a month for an entire year, so 12 Saturdays in the year, all the students had to show up to wash the police cars at the police department.
All of the cars?
Yeah, all the police cars, yeah.
Wow.
So they did that for every Saturday, once a month, for a year. And, no one got a criminal record from it because no charges were filed. And they did some good community service, I guess. And at the end, I've always wondered, where are these kids today? I'd love to go look them up. And I guess with social media now, I probably could spend.
Well, it's like the Animal House movie. One of them's a U.S. senator.
That's what I think. I really do think that probably a number of them have gone on to have humongously successful careers.
Right.
Private equity. They probably own an NFL team,
Right.
something like that, right? Or maybe a podcast studio like Ben.
Maybe it's Ben.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Oh no, you got me.
Right.
But you know, I have one question. It's
Right.
a fascinating story. I love your stories because they're just so funny and interesting. Did anybody ever take pictures of the police cars?
Of course they did.
What
Yeah,
happened?
Yeah.
Do you have those
Yeah, I
pictures?
have them in my storage locker.
You know what? You
Am
should
I-
frame them and bring them to a gallery. You may be able to sell them.
Right? You know, if you think about it, people can make pictures of like a toilet and sell them for hundreds of
Right.
thousands of dollars. This should sell for even more. So
That's a great story.
And
Guy.
from what I know, I remember hearing these cops got picked on really bad from all their colleagues, all the other officers, that never let them live it
No,
down.
that's
right?
great because they
Yeah.
didn't know as they're driving around. Like, that was at night, right?
Yes.
Could you imagine if it was during the day?
Oh, wow.
When the streets would be filled?
Yeah.
Oh, my
it would have
God.
been
the
it would have been a
embarrassment.
much bigger issue.
Well, they
these
probably would have been
witnesses.
flagged right away.
Right. Yeah.
Somebody would have pulled them
much
over and said,
sooner.
"Hey, do you know what's on the outside of your
Yeah,
car?"
right. But these kids, they kind of outsmarted the cops because they knew they were going to find out and come back to the house. And
Well, why didn't they get rid of the paint?
that's why I know they forgot the paint, but they cleaned everything else up. And they kind of said to me, you know, these cops thought they were scaring us when they came through and said, we could arrest you for this, we could arrest you for that. Da, da. And they were like, yeah, they were loud. The kids were laughing like, yeah, we knew they weren't going to arrest us. Come on. They were trying to just scare us.
Sounds like the cops got a little cocky.
Yeah. Oh, boy. All right.
Now,
All right.
now we have the name of this episode.
Yes.
Cops getting
Cocky
cocky. Cocky cops.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Well, Guy, your stories are always so fascinating.
Before you talk, though, what do we got to do? This show is sponsored.
Bye.
Who's our sponsor
Well, we
today?
did that at the beginning, didn't
Yeah,
we?
we got.
But
Yeah,
we're halfway through, though. We got it when we switched to a new episode. Come on, we're getting good at this, right?
Yep,
So-
we're getting paid.
Right? So now that we're going to start a new story, let's hear from our sponsor. You're Free to Go is sponsored by Lang Realty, South Florida's premier residential real estate broker. Whether you're buying, selling, or renting a home or condo, Lang's experienced realtors are standing by ready to help you. Contact one of Lang's top realtors today at 561-703-2427.
Well, we're back, and Guy, you know, that story was fascinating and very funny. You know,
It's so
what-
real, right?
I know.
It's like you could see these kids doing that.
well, it's almost like I feel like the comic who's followed the great comic that's just cracked
Oh,
up the
no.
audience.
I'm sorry.
'Cause my story isn't as funny, and it's certainly a little bit more serious.
It is serious.
But it is kind of unique, and it shows again just how people can believe whatever they want to believe. So I had a case years ago where my client was part of a group of people that they were commonly known as tax protesters. These are people who weren't paying their taxes or were advising other people not to pay their taxes because they believed that they didn't have the obligation to pay their taxes. Now, of course, at first that sounds kind of ridiculous because we all know what's the famous expression? There are only two things certain in life, death and taxes, right?
That's right.
But they only believed it was death.
By the way, our governor here in Florida, I know you're in California these days because you moved there because you want
Right.
to pay more in taxes.
Oh, yeah, I definitely want to
Right,
pay more
right.
taxes.
But believe it or not, our Florida governor, and everyone knows, I think, that we don't have income tax here in Florida, he's talking about eliminating real estate tax in Florida. If that happens, the whole country's going to move to Florida. It's
Well,
incredible.
yeah, but the problem is the garbage isn't going to be collected.
I know.
The streets aren't going to be clean. Where's the money to
Right.
do public, civil service?
Yeah, he says he's going to increase like the tourist taxes. There's certain things he'll increase, but the cities are concerned. They get a lot of their money, their budget comes from the state, and they're concerned that money coming from the state is going to be a lot less, and that they will have those issues.
Well,
that
nobody
you're talking
wants to
about.
pay taxes. If there's a universality here, it's that no one wants to pay taxes, but we have to. And the realistic part of it is that the money you pay, ideally, I say ideally, is used for purposes that are in the interest of the public and keeping the world moving.
Right.
Well, this group of people were indicted. They had a company, and they were indicted in a conspiracy to defraud the United States of America, essentially out of the payment of taxes. And what they were doing, they were putting on seminars, and they were instructing people. And for some reason that doesn't make perfect sense, a lot of the people who were watching these seminars, attending these seminars, and following their advice were doctors.
Interesting.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
and they always go to seminars to be judgment proof because of malpractice suits and put things in their wives' names. That's something they're very cognizant of.
And you know that your father.
My father's a retired physician. Yeah, so this is different.
And this is no knock on doctors. Thank God for doctors.
Right. You know, in a way, it's a knock on our career, our profession of our colleagues of lawyers.
Right.
Lawyers created this industry of lawsuit and lawsuit and lawsuit. So doctors, in response, have set up themselves to be judgment proof. You know, but just to clarify, so someone doesn't pay their taxes individually, they can get prosecuted. But you're talking about a group that had an entity that put on seminars.
And it was a conspiracy because they were giving people advice how it was illegal in their judgment. The tax laws were not proper. They were illegal. They weren't properly enacted.
Wow.
And not only did they not pay their taxes, they were advising people not to pay their taxes. So the government indicted them. And I've handled a lot of tax fraud cases in my career. It's the first time I ever encountered tax protesters. So I'm sitting with my client, who was not the leader of the pack, but he was one of the acolytes. And I'm having him explain to me the theory behind why the tax laws are invalid. And I think at one point I may have said to him, you know, I'm sorry, but the shuttle's here to take me back to the planet Earth.
Right.
Because it honestly was bizarre beyond bizarre. And when it came out in the courtroom, and this was the defense in the case, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute, the defense of the case required us to lay out exactly what the theory was and why these tax laws were invalid.
Sure.
And
by the way, do you remember what they were facing for a charge like that, a crime like that?
I think they were facing at a minimum 5 years. It may have been more. This was a while
ago,
back. I don't remember the details. But what happened is I'm listening to the explanation, and it was so convoluted and so detailed that you would get lost in the detail. And it went back to even, you know, revolutionary times and the enactment of laws and the enactment of the Constitution and the failure of this person to properly sign this document and the fact that this didn't go through the proper approval. And then ultimately the 16th Amendment, which gave the right to levy taxes, that the 16th Amendment was not properly enacted because Ohio, it's not been a state yet, or what? Some cockamamie stuff.
You know, the brain is such a powerful thing, and sometimes I come across people like that, and I think on one hand, they seem so brilliant, but on the other hand, they're so out of touch with reality.
Well, it was brilliantly misguided.
Right.
That's the way I thought. Well, the interesting part about the case is, in tax cases, you have a right to maintain a defense, and the Supreme Court has approved this under a case called Cheek versus United States. We call it the Cheek jury instruction. And you're allowed to defend the case claiming that you had a good faith, subjective belief that you did not have a duty to pay taxes. Of course, the qualification here is if you think the tax laws are illegal, is that the same thing? Right. We had legal arguments about that in front of the judge. Now, this case was also bizarre in another sense. We had a very good federal judge who decided he wanted to maximize the amount of time we had in front of the jury. But he also wanted us to have time at the end of the day to prepare for the next day. Because one of the challenges in these long trials, especially in federal court, we've got a lot of documents, white-collar cases, a lot of detail, is you finish court at 5:30 at night, sometimes 6, And then you've got to prepare for the next day. You hardly get to sleep.
Correct. Yeah.
So this judge decided we're going to start at 8:30 in the morning. We're not going to break for lunch, and we're going to go to 2:30.
Wow.
So we're going to get ourselves 6 hours of jury time.
Is he
Now-
letting the jury eat during the trial? Like
No,
lunch?
no.
Oh, they'll have their lunch at 2:30.
They'll have their lunch at 2:30. And by the
Wow,
way,
that's
he
aggressive.
didn't ask them
Right, he
for
told
their
them.
opinion on
Right.
this. He told them this is what we're going to do. Same for us. So we got to now get to court way before 8:30 to set up and be ready because this judge was a stickler for being on
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And we would hear our stomach rumble around noon or 1 o'clock. The problem was he never ended it at 2:30. It went to 3:30, 4 o'clock. So we wound up not eating. Sometimes we brought sandwiches or little, cakes
Right.
or something. And when we would run to the bathroom, get a bathroom break for a
Right.
few minutes, we'd gobble down whatever we could.
And that poor jury, though, they're probably starving as well.
And the
You know.
funny thing about the case is all of us lost weight,
Right.
except the prosecutor. The main prosecutor got fatter and fatter during the trial.
What was he doing?
I don't know, but there were two prosecutors. There was another one from the Department of Justice, and he was getting thinner. So we was joking that the fatter one was eating the thinner one. It was a crazy
get that.
case.
You and I have talked in a previous episode about how we monitor what we eat during a trial, because if you go have a lunch break and you eat too much, you get back for the afternoon of court and you're just exhausted, you're tired, your stomach is full. It's so we really do. It's, I guess, like an athlete for an event or something. We're very careful about what we eat, but I've never had a judge say, you're not eating. We're starting at 8:30. We'll quit at 2:30, 3:30, and you ain't eating. You're not
Well,
taking a
if
break.
2:30 would have worked out,
Yeah, it
we
might
would
not
have
have
run
been so
to a
bad.
restaurant. But by 3:34, so it wound up being all day without eating, which made it even more ridiculous.
Right.
So by the end of the day, we're getting a little
Sure,
crazy,
lightheaded. yeah.
lightheaded. It's interesting talking about eating and affecting what you do in the courtroom. I had a trial many years ago in New York City that lasted 4 months.
I remember that.
And
That was the year you had about 9 months of trial in
it
1
was
year.
incredible.
Yeah.
And that particular case, the judge was great. He let us have an hour and a half to an hour and 45-minute lunch break. And we were in downtown Manhattan, the courts are. And what was next to us? Little Italy
yeah.
and Chinatown.
Chinatown, right behind the
So
courthouse.
every day we would go either
Yeah.
to a restaurant in Little Italy or a restaurant in Chinatown and pig out. We would come back, and I'm telling you, there were times that each one of us would fall asleep.
Totally. Yeah.
We would
No,
fall
I've
asleep. And
been
I
there.
remember I was wearing cowboy boots one week so I could kick the guy next
So,
to me.
to keep
and
them
wake
awake. I know.
It was crazy.
You really have to think it through.
So getting back to
Yeah.
our tax protesters.
How many defendants were in the
There were
case?
4, I believe. yeah.
4. Okay.
And so the reason that these guys wanted to go to trial, and frankly, I told them from the very beginning, you have no defense. Jury's not going to buy this, because there's one thing that the jury hates more than the IRS. It's people who don't pay their taxes.
Right. Because all the people on the jury
You
are,
got to pay your
all
taxes,
those jurors are paying their
right?
taxes.
Right? They hate the IRS. They don't like the IRS
Right.
agents testifying, but they hate you more
Right.
because you're not paying it,
Yeah.
and they got to pay.
Sure. But I would imagine the defendants want to win this trial and make a statement to the world that, hey, we're right. You don't have to pay taxes. These laws weren't passed properly. They're unconstitutional, right? Isn't that what they're
Right.
trying to get that word out there? They want to win.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
on the other side, the government is very concerned
Oh boy.
about that,
they
because that
lose-
result will only embolden more people
Right.
to take that attitude.
Yeah.
So the strange part about the trial is we had to tell the jury, look, they may be wrong, because there was no way I was going to stand up in front of a jury and say this bizarre theory of why the tax laws are irrelevant because the pen didn't work in 1786 signing the document, ridiculous stuff
Or
like
they
that.
signed on the wrong line.
Right, or signed on the wrong line.
Yeah.
There's no way I was going to stand up and say that to the jury. But the defense was, my client, as misguided as he may be, had a good faith belief that this is what was the case.
Right.
So I had to sell that to the jury. So what happened is, at one point in the trial, the main defendant, the guru, the guy who invented all this nonsense, had decided to fire his lawyer.
Oh, boy.
Because he figured he'd do a better job than his lawyer, because after all, he figured out how the tax laws are
That's right.
illegal.
Yeah.
So he's a genius.
Yeah. But we all know the saying, when you represent yourself, you have a fool for a client.
Right.
Yeah. Big
So
mistake.
he made the mistake of taking the witness stand in his own
no.
defense. Now, it's very interesting. When you put your client on the witness stand, your defendant on the witness stand, you ask him questions, he answers the questions, prosecutor cross-examines, answers those questions, then you get what we call redirect or rehabilitation. Well, when there's no lawyer representing you, how are questions asked? They're not. And you obviously can't do a Woody Allen and be in the box, run out, ask a question, come back in the box. So what happens is you wind up just telling a story.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is it's not generally allowed. A narrative's not allowed.
Correct.
And you're able to get in stuff that wouldn't meet the rules of evidence requirements. And it's a real frustration for the prosecutor, because you're able to basically say things you're not allowed to say in the courtroom.
Right.
Well, he got on the stand and went on, and I see the jury looking at him like, oh my God, this guy's from Mars. I mean, this is ridiculous.
It's sounding to me like when you play poker and the guy next to you, you're saying, do not pull that card, do not pull that card. And they pulled that card, and you know it just is going to,
my God.
now you're done.
And he's
You're
just
done.
killing himself, and by virtue of that, killing the rest of us.
Exactly. That's my point.
So I decided I had the right to cross-examine him.
Yeah.
Even though I'm on the same side of the table, the same table, I had the right to cross-examine him. So I decided to get up and cross-examine him. My theory was to point out how much he spent time with my client,
Right.
instructing my client, and how much my client was really intently listening, and how much my client believed him. But in the course of that, he buried himself even deeper. And by the end of it, at one point, I saw one of the jurors looking down, and then he looked away. He turned his chair away.
You got to turn to the microphone, Mark.
Well, I
our
want the
listeners,
jury to see.
They can't.
He
The
turned
jury.
away.
Where's the jury here?
He turned away like this, away from everybody. And when he turned around, he was hysterical with laughter.
Right, laughing.
He couldn't stop.
Then did the rest of the jury
And
start
it-
laughing?
One or two people
Yeah,
started
that often
chuckling.
happens.
And what happened is it stopped everything till he couldn't stop laughing.
Wow.
He couldn't stop laughing. And at that moment, I decided, I made my point.
You
So
sat down.
I said, you know what? I don't think I have any more questions.
Yeah, no more questions.
And I sat down. It was the craziest case I've ever seen in a real federal courtroom, because everybody probably left every night saying, what are these guys doing? Why are they defending this case?
Right.
And ultimately, everybody was convicted. There never was a defense of
Right.
any validity. The judge was so amused by what had happened. He gave the lightest sentences I'd ever experienced in a tax case. I don't know. Maybe it was his payment for the entertainment.
Right. It was very entertaining
He
to
was
him.
very entertained.
Well, you said, my case that I talked about first was very entertaining, and that this transition to your very serious, intense case wouldn't be the best transition. But at the end of the day, it was as entertaining as mine.
Well, I don't.
know?
It was a different type
It
of
didn't have to
entertainment.
do with penises on police cars, but it had to do with a government agency.
Well, the only difference is this is a case you really had to be there. I could not properly describe how bizarre their theory was and how misguided it was. And more importantly, when you think about it, how people of great intelligence, doctors and other high-functioning people, would buy it and use it to convince themselves not to pay taxes.
Right, they were actually paying to go to their seminars,
They were paying to go to the
learning,
seminars.
and then not paying their
They were
taxes.
listening, and actually there was a video that the government played of one of the seminars, And you see these people sitting in the audience taking notes.
Right?
Taking notes.
And you know what the government really could have done was then subpoena everyone who registered for those conventions, those seminars, and then look to see if they filed their taxes and gone after every one of those.
Well, there's a very interesting result of that. What happened is we were wondering, was the government going to turn around and indict all those people?
Right.
It turns out they didn't want to bother doing that. Instead, they levied penalties on them. And the fraud penalty that the IRS can level is 75% of the tax due. So if you owed $100,000, you now owe the government $175,000. And they levied people and they went after them for those penalties as well as the tax calculated that was due.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing.
It was a crazy case.
Yeah, and the government does make cases that way a lot. You know, you'll see on a totally different topic, but like people who are in chat rooms for a very common crime, unfortunately nowadays, you know, exchange of child pornography.
Oh, yeah.
And then they'll use a credit card to buy, excuse me, some child pornography, and then they just track it through the credit card processing. And next thing you know, you're getting arrested. So they will take that information to lead to other cases. Yeah.
Well, the number one way, at least in the federal system, that the government is able to successfully prosecute cases is what we're going to talk about in the next episode that we do.
Cooperation.
Which is cooperation.
100%.
Yeah. It is the world of rats.
Yeah, and it's always interesting when a client comes in and we talk to them about cooperation, you know, because it's their decision whether they want to cooperate. And some clients immediately say, not in a million years would I become a rat or a narc. I will never, ever cooperate. Some would say, I'd like to cooperate, but my life will be in danger. My family's life will be in danger. You can't put me in that position. And then others will say, I'll do whatever I have to do to get myself out of this. So I'll be happy to cooperate and give the government anything they need.
Well, the statistics are staggering. The percentage of people who are faced with a serious federal crime where there may be others involved or they have information about other crimes, the percentage of people who wind up cooperating with the government to get a lesser sentence is staggering.
Right.
And, you know, for a lawyer, there are lawyers out there who will say, I never represent cooperators. Honestly, I think that's bullshit.
Of course.
Because the truth is, either that means they have no business
Right.
or they're lying.
Right.
Because ultimately, you've got to do what's in your client's best interest. I'm not a fan of it, but damn, if a client hires me and that's the way to go, I'll go 100% with them
Their choice.
on that. But I've always said, for me, it feels like being a eunuch at an orgy. You know?
Yeah.
You're sitting around watching the government screw with your client.
Sure. Yeah. We have to educate them on that. We have to tell them all of that, and then it's their decision.
That's right.
And one of the parts that clients have, the nuance they have trouble with is the trust factor, because it's not like where we say, okay, you cooperate and this is your outcome. You know, sometimes it's you cooperate and we find out what benefit you're getting at the end of the case.
Oh, most of the time. In
Right.
state court, it's different,
Yeah.
but in federal court, there are no upfront promises.
Correct.
It's totally up to the government,
Right.
and they could turn around to you at the end of the day and screw you, and your only remedy is if you can prove that they acted in bad faith,
Right.
and that's a very difficult standard.
It is.
But we'll talk about that
Yeah.
next time, some of the interesting cases we've had on that.
Yeah.
All right?
I look forward to that because we have a lot of stories on cooperation. So I guess until the next episode,
You're
you're
free,
free to go. Down Low Investigations is a sponsor of You're Free to Go. Behind every great criminal defense attorney is a great private investigator. That's why Mark and I use Down Low to investigate cases all over the country. Down Low can help you too, whether you're running a background check on an employee or running a background check on a blind date, or let's say you need someone followed or some other type of investigative work conducted. Down Low is the way to go. Call Download Investigations at 561-843-1806. Everything expressed and discussed in this episode are the opinions and experiences of attorneys Guy Fronston and Mark Nurek and their guests. All ethical rules are complied with. Attorney-client privilege and confidential information is not shared or released during these episodes, and names, dates, locations, and other identifying information may be changed to protect confidentiality. Topics are embellished, and none of the statements made constitute legal advice and should not be considered or relied on as such.